I'm gonna pause that just for that goes live on YouTube. And then we'll start. So you can see it on YouTube.
I'll probably never want.
Pause that just for that goes live on YouTube. And we'll start. Great. Welcome to Journey Through the Eyes, the Rewired 360 EMDR podcast. We are here today with a fabulous conversation with Messina Delgado. She's a part of my EMDR University program. She's an LPCA. Want to make sure that we understand that, not fully licensed, but still. We have an amazing connection over neurodivergence and we laugh a lot. So expect lots of laughs. And I am Kathy Couch, your Rewired 360 host out here in Twin Falls, Idaho. I own Willow Creek Counseling and Rewired 360, where we teach therapists how to learn, lead, and thrive and create their own thriving practices. You can see me at rewired360.com. And I help therapists like Messina get their EMDR certification. That's how I met her. And I'm kind of mentoring her through that process. So I'm going to turn it over to her and then we'll get into our conversation about neurodivergence. If you're watching on YouTube, we can make room for those comments as they come up. So join us on YouTube. We're going to try this new YouTube live stream for our podcast. And so you can join us and we can talk to you in the chat and spend time together. So I'm going to turn it over to Messina.
Okay. Hi. How's it going? Yeah. What do you wanna start?
Tell us where you're at, where you're located
Oh,
at, your practice, and a little bit about yourself.
okay. I am in Sugarland. I practice in Sugarland. I am in Texas. Um, what else did you say? See, there it goes. There's the neurodivergence at work already.
Yeah, what is your practice called?
Oh, yeah, right on. Okay, so I have two that I work at. So my practice is called Open Narrative Counseling, and then I also work for Robin Lee Counseling as well.
Mhm.
I work with trauma, neurodivergence. I work with children, adults. I find that adults are tiny, larger children, and especially when it comes to sensitive materials, not because they act like children, but because it just hurts, right? Like
Yeah.
it just hurts. Feeling vulnerable makes us feel small. So like that's why I work with both populations. Um, I really like my job. Like
Love my job. I
really
love
like my
my
job.
job.
Um, yeah, it took me a long time to fall into the job just because of, being undiagnosed for the longest time. I was just like, maybe I'll go over here, I'll go over here, and like having expansive interests, but yet only being engaged in certain interests and, you know, just believing that if I tried harder, I could do it.
Can you share with us what it means for a listening audience who may not be clinicians, what undiagnosed means?
It just means that I had no idea what was going on, right? Like I thought I was just like,
Hmm.
this is how everybody is. It
Yeah.
has to be, right? And they have the secret and I don't, right? That's how I experienced life, like even as a kid
Mm-hmm.
amongst my family. I was like, they know something that I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't so like it was like a puzzle,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't until I got into this idea of like just being okay with being an observer
Yeah.
that I really understood what worked for me and what didn't. Like an observer of self and an observer of others.
Yeah, and so we're talking today a little bit about neurodivergence and how this topic kind of comes forward. And so we're clinicians, and we're also looking at neurodivergence, including autism and ADHD and other neurodiverse conditions. And then we also, as you know, this is our EMDR channel. Always love how to weave in EMDR in there.
The cognitive interweave.
Yes, so I wanted to just wondered if you could explain a little bit about what neurodivergence is and how you became to understand a little bit more about that.
Well, okay, so neurodivergence is anything that falls under the diagnostic spectrum of having a brain that's wired differently. So high IQ can be sometimes considered neurodivergency. ADHD, dyslexia, OCD is sometimes thrown in there, depending on who you're talking to. Autism, right? And then all of that has like a spectrum
Right.
in there. There's
Mhm.
a spectrum of autism, there's a spectrum of ADHD, there's a spectrum of OCD, and then there's a spectrum of dyslexia. And then there's all the little tiny pieces of diagnoses that go under those things, like PDA and which is persistent demand avoidance. And
That's a new one for me.
yeah,
Oh, okay.
it all depends on how you color it, right? Uh, Then there's alexithymia is or sensory processing disorder,
Mhm.
audio processing disorder. I don't know, I don't know if that falls under the umbrella, but I do know that falls under the experience. And then you have trauma on top of the
Yeah, right.
neurodivergent experience, right?
Mhm.
So then you just then you have culture and then you have everything, and then it just becomes this beautiful tapestry of what are we gonna what are we gonna hit on today?
What are we gonna do today, kids?
Yeah. That's why I like using EMDR with neurodivergency because I'm not I'm not here for the answer and I'm not going to give anybody an answer, but I am here for the conversation.
Good.
You know what I mean? Always. I'm always down for a conversation.
That's what I love about you. You're always just as curious as I am, and our brains go like very fast. And so I always say, with ADHD brains, we go fast, and it's just like it can be a superpower. I think you said that we can be a superpower, but it can also be a challenge too. So,
Well, yeah, especially so the way I like to frame neurodivergence is just a hyper awareness of agency.
mhm.
And then some of us are really good at trying to protect our agency, and some of us are just like, I can't, I have to figure out how to make it work. Right? And a wiggly body is a sign of trying to hold on to agency. Um,
Tell me about that. Tell me about that.
Well, I mean, sometimes it's anxiety. Sometimes if we look at it in the classroom, sometimes it's anxiety. Sometimes it's trauma happening outside of the classroom. Sometimes it's a neurodivergent body who's like, the lights are so loud, and so I gotta do something with that. And then sometimes it's a neurodivergent body that's like, you can't tell me to sit down. Like
Yeah.
I get how you want me to sit down, but I don't care. And
Hmm.
it's not like I don't care because I don't care about the community and I don't care about systems and I don't care about everything else. It's just this awareness of agency.
So I
Just
wanted to
like,
ask you, how did you become, I know that you characterize yourself as neurodiverse as well.
mhm,
And so can you talk to us a little bit about like how you began? We have neurodivergence. So really when we think about neurodivergence, it's a lot of sensory components, lights,
social.
textures, sounds, being in our body, all of these sensory experiences. So we have that, right? We come into this world with all of these, bright lights and then we have trauma, right?
Mhm.
And so that's what you and I together are working on is this trauma. So, what inspired you to adapt EMDR for neurodivergent clients?
Oh.
And how do you begin to think about that?
Well, okay, so when I was in my training for EMDR, I took
Mhm.
it with Rick Levinson in Austin. And on all the negative cognitions, I was like, but that's true, right? Like which one is it? I can't trust my judgment. That's true.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I don't know how else to put it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and in an EMDR, if it's true, it won't work. Like it
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
can't, like um it's it's a moot point. But so and I was trying to explain that in my practicum with my who are those are what are they called? See? What are they called?
The consult, the little small group,
Yeah, the
consult,
practicum and the person that's
the consultant. Yeah.
there you go.
Uh-huh.
Um so I tried to explain that. Like so we were supposed to do a float back and we were training on the float back and mine went to a place at school where all of the neurodivergence, was happening and I wasn't aware. And then the memory I had was I was like, but this is true. Like the negative cognition is true. It's absolutely true. And I was trying to explain that to them and they were like, No, it's not." And it was like, "No, it totally is." And then so I asked Rick, on a question. I said, it's true." And then he was like, "Well, then what does that say about you?" And it hit me and then my whole body lit up. And I was like, "Okay, thank you, I gotta go, bye." And then because I was about to just like cry. Because that's the difference. When it's true, it doesn't light up in my body, right? I don't feel it as a sensory experience because I don't want to cuss, but I do want to cuss so bad. That that would help me so much right now.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Cussing is my stimming, I guess. But so I really nothing would light up. I was like, this is true. It's true. And then so when he got me to go deeper, I was like, ooh, ooh, okay, I'm gonna go eat my lunch and cry now. And,
Yeah.
and so I was like, yeah, how many of us are being told, no, that's your negative cognition, or it sounds right to me,
Yeah.
but we're not feeling it, right? Like we can't feel it. And then if you're neurodivergent and then you just have no interoception to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
like that's worse,
And I think that's so important. So with the EMDR training, we have 40 hours of instruction. Then we have, in that 40 hours, we have these little groups. We have an observer, a listener, and a mock client. And so we're asked to go through these experiences in these small groups ourselves. And so we have this lived experience as we go through this. I had, even when I went through my basic training, which is the first training you go through, to be EMDR, to treat patients with EMDR, my brain at that night was like, it was like, I felt like it was like a library. It was like filing material and like, I don't even know what's going on. Right? And so like, what the heck? So I was up and my brain's doing this thing that I never had it do before. And so then when I went back to work, so we did these EMDR trainings on the weekends, which in my practice, when I do EMDR trainings, I'm gonna make it during the week so we don't burn out clinicians. But I knew like when I went back to work Monday, my whole body was just drained
Yeah.
and tired, and I wasn't even working on like a big traumatic incident, right? And so I think really helping people understand that the material in our brains can be resolved with EMDR because of that body sensation you had. You're never going to forget it, right? And it's like, but you'll know when it's cleared, right? And I was like, yes, this is the great part of this, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just so powerful as we're treating patients with neurodivergence. So what are some of the strategies for our EMDR clinicians out there, maybe thinking about providing EMDR, doing EMDR, and then they have a neurodivergent client? What are some of the strategies maybe that tips we can offer?
Well, number one, always trust your client.
Mm-hmm.
Always, just always.
Mm-hmm.
If they tell you I can't feel it, believe them.
Yeah.
Don't always think it's trauma related,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because then you conceptualize in a different direction. I mean, put a pin in it, like put the like, okay, well,
Yeah.
there could be trauma. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
as long as you're doing your ACEs, you
Mm-hmm.
should know whether or not there's trauma in there. And
Mm-hmm.
you're doing your DES, you should know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Ask questions in your DES to see if it's like, well, yeah, I don't listen really well. Like I listen and then I go, boop. You know, I always think of Homer Simpson when somebody's talking to him at the apple cider, at the apple cider store, and his brain leaves his head. Like it's just like, I don't care. It's gonna go over here. Um,
So it could be misconceptualized as dissociation, right?
yeah, but
And
it's
that's
really, I'm just disengaged.
it's just their brains, just like it doesn't really matter. I'm over here doing like whatever the work is that the brain,
Yeah.
right?
And then when you have ADHD, you kind of are like, I know how this sentence is going to go, you know, and you're just like, finish the sentence. And I'm guilty of that too, because then I have odd ADHD. So, you know, my when I'm conceptualizing a case, I bring out every single detail, as
Yeah.
you have experienced, where it's like, no, but you need to know this. No, but you need to like, because I really want an answer that fits the puzzle versus an answer that where I'm like, no, I've already, you know, like
Yeah.
I've already like thought about that or felt that.
How do
So
you experience your own neurodivergence when you're with a neurodivergent patient? Do you get, um, do you, are you dysregulated
no.
sometimes, or are you regular? I mean, sometimes I feel like, I have patients that are neurodivergent too, and sometimes we just have this really fun, like,
Yeah,
yeah, and we do like we say things, but we don't say them. We get what we mean.
yeah, 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 yeah.
No, it's just like a unsaid, unspoken rapport, I guess, that we
Yeah.
have together, and it can be really fun. I don't find it dysregulating.
Mhm.
We just always call it like, "Hey, what are you doing with your hands there?" Or "What's going on in your body?" And so, like, it can be a really good conversation for rapport. Uh,
Yeah.
what have you experienced with your patients?
Well, so you know, going back to like the staples, like behavior is conversation. Um,
Yeah,
you don't need the exact words to have communication. Like attunement is imperative, right? So if you notice, I'm not giving you eye contact because I'm trying to focus. Because as soon as I look at you,
yeah.
I'm gonna be like, "Hey, what's
Yeah.
hi?" You
It's
know, like
information, right? It's too much. I need to just focus on this. No more information in the brain. This is like what's going on fire right here,
yeah.
right? That's
I
pretty
like
good.
I want to know how your plants are doing. Like I have all of these other conversations that I'm
Okay.
like, I
It's
need to know
overload.
how the plants are. And if a cat pops up, and like if I'm doing something online and a cat or a dog pops up, I'm like, everybody stop.
Yeah.
Just please let me know what that animal's name is, and then we can continue after that. But so like I have people who are like, and then I was, ah! And so instead of being like, what word would you put with, ah?
Yeah.
I understand, like, obviously, I've seen enough movies to go, that's a bit of surprise, and that's a bit of like awe, or depending on the context of the story, right? Like, understand the story that's unfolding in front of you and how they're communicating it. And
Yeah.
sometimes slow them down depending on it. And I'll say, okay, well, what's in the, you know, if we're working on getting in tune with our body and getting the mind and the body connected.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to do that right away. I'm not going to start session one or even session two asking them to like connect. I'm going to build confidence in our ability to communicate with each other and understand each other first before I go into like
Yeah.
well, like, so how would you like to adjust, you know, and how would you like to even be in your body?
What I think is so powerful with neuro, at least the ADHD neurodivergent clients, is when so we have our history and then we go into stabilization of the nervous system. For people that don't know what EMDR is, then we work on a memory or set of events that are tied to a belief. And so when we're in that process, when we're using the eye movements and helping them understand, part of EMDR is notice that, notice what comes up. There's so much information, right? Like you had said, I need to divert my eyes because there's too much information in your setting. There's so much information. I think one of the main interventions that's so effective is it's just information, but
Yeah.
there's so much. So I came up with this metaphor analogy just this week. Okay, so it
Okay.
was like, um, it's like you are going to a carnival and you
Mhm.
walk through the carnival and
Mhm.
you know that there's food, that there's cows, that there's, all the things going, you know that there's rides, there's no ticket takers, there's nobody taking money.
Mhm.
The rides don't have carnival workers, there's no line for the rides. This Ferris wheel is just going around. You go to get something to eat, nobody's regulating the nacho cheese with the chips. Nobody's making sure that the corn dog mix is correct with the correct sticks. Nobody's taking money. The lines, people are just grabbing a corn dog. The popcorn's everywhere, right? There's a cow in the middle of whatever, there's a
Yeah.
cow in the middle of the walkway. And so it's like we have all of this information. And the way I describe EMDR is that's what brain comes to us. That's oftentimes what brain comes to us at the beginning, right?
Mhm.
And then what we do with the EMDR is we take all of that information and we make it into a nice line. So when you go to get the corn dog, there's a line. You have money. You know where the money is. You pay for it. You eat the corn dog. And like, there's nothing wrong. There's no personal sense of responsibility that you showed up at the carnival and it's chaos, right? Whose
Mhm.
responsibility is it? Not yours. You just came, right? And it was like, oh, okay, right? And so we take these, now we have this experience at the carnival where we can go on a ride if we want to. There's a ticket taker that's going to make sure that it's safe, the ride's safe, there's not going too fast. I'm not going to fly off, the
Yeah.
Megatron or whatever. And so it's like, okay, so we have these like, we just need some regulation in the system in certain categories so we can conceptualize and understand it. And then also realize like, I don't need to talk to every person
Yeah.
that attended the carnival. I
Yeah.
can and so it's this observation, this great experience to where people can feel like it's not their responsibility. It's just what the carnival was.
Yeah.
And so by working with EMDR and taking that little piece and focusing on it, it can generalize the treatment effects to other parts of the brain and make it a full, fun experience where you're looking at the horses, where the horses should be, the cows,
Yeah.
and so that's kind of a metaphor I came up this week with in regards to how that um, how that looks. And so it's been really interesting to think about that. And that person that I used that intervention with was like, yes, this just information. And so well, cognitive interweave is a little piece of information that can shift that. And so that's one of the interweaves or metaphors that I used with EMDR.
Mhm.
And so it can be very, very effective. What did you think about that as I was saying that to you? What's going on in your body, your thought, emotion channel?
Well, I actually, my son went on a field trip to a place called Dewberry Farms, and that's exactly what it was like. I was like, what? Huh? And then I was a chaperone, so I was responsible not only for my child, but the children of other parents who love these little beings that are just around. So, there was this, there was the sun. First of all, there was the sun, and
Mhm.
it was alive and happening that day. I mean, it was just, you couldn't stop it. There was not a cloud in the sky to stop it from doing what it was going to do. And that I had a hat on, I had glasses, I had sunglasses on, but it just like, it was not like I even dressed, I did all the things. I did all the things that I'm supposed to do. Right. But I don't know if it was a combination of being outside and then overstimulated with all of the children and all of the
Yeah,
things. And then the duty of like making sure I know where all of my group of children are at the same time. And then making sure they're hydrated. And then all of this
yeah,
stuff. I just remember like at the end of that day, taking my kid home and being like, I don't, I, I weigh 5'7", and then just like laying on the couch and just being like, I am the couch, like trying to get my body back into
yeah,
itself, right? Because it's the sensory. It all goes out this way and then it comes in this way. And so to just take it, I would love to be able to take it one at a time.
yeah,
Would love to have been able to just be like, we're walking through the door, and this is where we eat, and this is where we go to the bathroom, and this is where they
yeah,
play.
yeah,
Um, and that is like if you added trauma on top of that, right? then you're just, then it's like way too much information. And why would you want to process it?
Yeah.
It was overwhelming to begin with, and then something bad happened, and then it was just like,
Sometimes I find with patients that with ADHD I'm treating, sometimes they can process very quickly. Boom, 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 boom. Have you had that experience as well? Can you
yeah.
tell a little bit about your experience treating patients like that with that kind of
Uh,
brain?
well, with ADHD, it's like we always have to go faster.
Mhm.
Sometimes faster, shorter sets, sometimes faster, longer sets, depending on the person's ability to resource and their history, of course, always history. Um, I find that they like the ball online more than they like my hands.
Okay.
Um, I have to make sure if I'm doing it in person that there's no other scent. Sometimes I can't have a lot of like can't have put lotion on or even my hand sanitizer on. So if I'm going to do something with somebody with ADHD, I really have to like neutralize my area. The only reason why my lights are on in my office right now is because it looked a little moody with the other lights on. I hate overhead lighting, so it's
Yeah, I
one.
don't like it either. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I always have my lights off just to bring the nervous system back down, especially with people who have ADHD. I
Mhm.
always keep my lights off and I always do what do they call that? Mood lighting, but it's called atmospheric lighting. So that way they can get back connected to self.
Yeah. And even that sense of coming into the office. So I have my overhead lights on too. And I also have lamps. You can see one in the back right there. And it has a little, lever of like how
Yeah.
hot, how not. And so I think
Yeah.
that's a really important point. Just assessing your lighting in your office if you're a clinician, creating that atmosphere. I always had lamps even when I worked at the hospital,
Yeah.
um, and other settings. I think that's so important to have that sense of tone, that felt sense of comfort when you're
Hmm.
walking into that space and feeling like you can actually rest and digest. So again, in that parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah. I have one that is strictly online and she's amazing at processing. Just amazing at it because like she does the same thing. She sets it up for her to just really focus and she follows the dot really well and like she gets really far in session really quick. The with autistic individuals, it's a little different. But what I would like to just point out and say, I've had a lot of people with ADHD and autism try EMDR,
Yeah.
and the therapist has told them that they do it wrong. And
Oh, no. So
yeah,
point, if you're a therapist, please don't say that to patients. Please
yeah,
don't. We have a lot of trust in us. That would be like number one. So please don't do that to people.
yeah. And so I always give the spiel of like, a spiel is kind of like a harsh word, maybe I should say. I always give the
Orientation.
orientation and the comfort of like saying like it's not your job to do EMDR well. It's my job to have the tools
Yeah.
to make sure EMDR is going in a direction that it needs to go in. And basically it's like I let you do whatever you want to do, but if I
Yes.
get into stuck points,
Yeah.
that's when I intervene, or if I see that you're like I'll vocalize something just to make sure that you're still present, but to keep my job is to keep you here in the room while you're processing back
Because what
here.
does that do, right? That makes them feel
Yeah.
like it's a performance. So when that feels like it's a performance with the patient and therapist, it doesn't allow you to be vulnerable and process. I had a consultee this week, and she was saying, there was this moment with my therapist, and we were there, and we were processing, and there was a group of people in another room, interns that were making a lot of noise and disrupting the session. And she's like, the moment I bonded with my therapist was when she banged on the wall and said, "Hey, calm down. We're doing business in here." And so that again, like the client just felt like, oh, this is my person. It was like, yeah,
Yeah.
like that sense of safety is so important. And even I think atmospherically is so important too, like with EMDR, because we want to make sure everything, there is no interference with what they're processing, and creating those safe boundaries within our culture of our office and our community can build that rapport and confidence too. Again, so yeah, I love what you're saying about we're the facilitators and we have to protect that space for the client and for them to say, your brain you are so inadequate at this. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, I would not, don't do that.
And
If
just
that's gonna be a
another
new target for them.
I know exactly.
Don't do that.
I also like with some of my clients, so if there's a combination of autism and high anxiety, which usually there is, right? I dress the same. I don't wear different clothing because it's the ability to predict, right, what they're going to get into that I think helps open up um the channels have, if you will, or just the idea that they can get back to self when they
Yeah.
walk through my door, you know.
And this idea of self, right? So like I was having a conversation this week about therapy,
Mhm.
which is, DBT skills, put water on your face, eat some chocolate, take a nap, do
Yeah.
a walk, right?
Yeah.
Practice these skills. So what the difference is with EMDR is this psychotherapy, is this sense of self. And so when you have and integrate a client that comes in and they have a distorted sense of self, right? Or
Mm.
they don't even know they have a sense of self because of all this information. They just are an information, walking information, and to feel like, oh, I have a self, and just to cut those channels of information to be like landing on the couch.
Mhm.
No pun intended. I'm a couch, but right. So it's like that sense of like, if we can just cut that information and just allow it to be, we can enhance that sense of self, right? And so this is a real psychotherapy. We're getting to the core of why am I dysregulated and anxious? Oh, it's because of this belief that I had, that my therapist said that I wasn't doing it right, that reinforced all of these messages in my
Yeah.
past,
Yeah.
to my, past self, that at 3, I wasn't doing it right because I wasn't, eating the food off my plate correctly or whatever, right?
Right
So,
on. Yeah.
right. And so that activated that network of
Yeah.
deeper issue, but we just treat oh, you're worth it, you matter. No, we have to go back to
Yeah.
what the origin or the source is. And that's what we do with EMDR. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, and then we have to let them experience their neurodivergence as they experience it, right? We can't say, well, you're really good at empathy. Great, fantastic, amazing, wonderful.
Yeah.
Like my narrative is completely different from everybody else's in the world. It has similarities, right? But the way my brain is wired is the way it's wired. And then because I have
Yeah.
amazing observational skills and because of the narrative of my systemic environment as a child with my home and then all the outward systemic influences, right? Like that's how my brain got to have high empathy. We
Yeah.
need to change our idea from myopic to more expansive of what it is our clients experience when they fall under a diagnostic criteria. Right?
Hmm.
It's just I understand the need to have the diagnostic criteria, but um there's so people have done so much work to expand upon like, well, that looks like this too, and it looks like this and it feels like this. So I think there's and then allowing neurodivergent people to never get to zero, I think is really important. Um,
Ooh, tell me about that.
well, because again, things are true,
Hmm.
right? And neurodivergent populations, especially children, are the highest, like they have the highest, or they have a high, I can't say highest because, zoom out, not in. They have a high, um, here we go. It's getting stuck. They have a high statistics for assault. And so like because of that, like anybody who's a victim of trauma, like getting to zero is not exactly appropriate for people who need to like kind of like understand. I'm losing it. For people that need to,
For people that,
are environments that are not going to change. Does that make sense?
mm-hmm,
So we're not changing the wiring of the brain,
mm-hmm,
and we're doing EMDR in a neurodivergent person. So that also needs to be understood. We're not going to change the neurodiversity.
mm-hmm.
It's
Right,
always going to be
right.
there.
That's a biological mechanism. Okay. Good
Right.
to
And
hear.
so like if we've learned something from a situation because of whatever has happened to us, like getting to zero, I don't know if that's appropriate. I don't know if there's any been research on this, but it's like, well, I need to know when this may happen again is a concern,
Mm-hmm,
right? I need to know that um I need to know that I can handle myself and that I can do it and that I can trust my intuition or I can trust these things, right? So
mm-hmm.
it's not so much about getting to zero and clearing it out in the same capacity as other people, but it is about getting confident in who they are with the situation that they've experienced. Does that
And
make
isn't
sense?
that so much more powerful, right? So she's talking about the subjective unit of distress scale that we use in EMDR 0 to
There you
10.
go.
So when we get
Yeah.
to 0, that means we've cleared the target. But I think what you're saying is so much more impactful for me to hear because I could have a client say, "Yep, it's cleared, it's a 0." And that's sometimes clients are very vigilant about, I need to be a 0. No,
Yeah.
look at the state change. If you've had a state change that's going to be with you outside of therapy that's so effective, who cares what the rating is?
Yeah.
For a neurodivergent client, that's like, I have to be a 0. It's like, oh, okay. There's also a sense that felt sense is very important. And there's also a sense of, if I get to 0, then who am I?
Yeah.
Or what does that mean for me? And so there's a lot of, like, as a grief and loss therapist, it could be, a sense of loss of identity, or what would that mean? Because this has been in the background working ever since childhood, this belief or this experience, right? And so if I resolve that, then what am I left with? So it can be a very vulnerable identity and a sense of self as well. And so would we rather have them have this felt lived sense of this adaptive, very, you know, the state change that they've had? Can we enhance that and say, yes, even though we have this material, this is what we want to enhance is your right now self, the self that's able to go and feel, adaptive and healthy and whole and like you matter in the world, and that is enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
See, you hold the science. I'm like, I know there's words. I just don't have them right now.
yeah,
I'm very overstimulated. But and then you said something in there and I was like, oh yeah, we need to point that out too. Because it also happens culturally, right? Like we can't expect people who have a cultural difference to get to zero as well.
right.
Um, it's just it's another one of those things. It's just like the truth, but this is the truth. Like you can't tell them, no, it's not, right? Because then their defenses
Yeah,
get up.
yeah,
Well, and then you're like, there's nothing that's going to be processed because there's already a block to process if you say, no, it's not. Your truth is not true.
right.
So you have to let all things be in the room. You
Mhm.
have to let the universe be in the room with your own universe, your own.
Yes, I love that.
And then you have to let it go. And a lot of my clients are like, well, what is this? Is this the neurodiversity? Is this my cultural background? Or is it and I'm like, again, we're not here for the answer. We're here for the conversation. And EMDR just kind of speeds up that conversation.
Yeah,
And then I don't have to be like, yeah, it's totally your neurodiversity,
I love that. Yeah,
right? They get to pick and choose, or they get to understand through their own somatic experience and through the
exactly.
through the the clearing and the suds difference, like they get to pick and choose, or their nervous system gets to actually communicate what it is, what it was, what it is they want to hold on to, what it is they want to let go of, and I just get to, man, I just get to like,
Yeah.
I just get to
I
like,
do. It's like
yeah.
part of this magical process. I had a client that said, this feels like magic. And I think EMDR is kind of getting more talked about.
Mhm.
And I feel like the state change or the shift is really what, is so important about this. In EMDR, there's such a vast amount of information to learn too
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
the body and the nervous system. And so it can also keep stimulating us to learn and grow,
Yeah.
in the field and expand our skill set. So it's just this, when I found EMDR, I had been working with clients, maybe even for years, that were going through this narrative experience of the CBT process. And there's nothing wrong with CBT. I use CBT, but it's like dissecting the trauma with the thought, the emotion of every incident through analysis, which is our frontal brain,
Yeah.
versus getting to the psychology behind it of like, yeah, we know that happened, but like, what did you believe? And every person that has that same experience will experience it differently through their own body and emotion and thought channel. And so getting them to feel like, okay, let's dissect, what did you believe, or what did this reinforce, and work on that with bilateral stimulation versus the reliving and the retelling of that experience is just where the magic is.
Yeah, no. And then like, so I do parts work as well, right? Because neurodivergent people, autism spectrum compartmentalization is just a part of it, right? So I do parts work and I do somatic work as well. And the reason I like to do somatic work with EMDR is just like it gives them the freedom to like, do you need to walk this out as we do the bilateral stimulation? Like people will be
That's good.
rocking, they'll be walking, and the buzzers will be going, like shake your hands. Some people will be doing this while the buzzers are going. Um, I also use art a lot with my clients, a lot a lot. And I have a big pad of paper, and I use Mr. Sketch smelly markers to
Okay.
like track their EMDR progress. Like I use it so they can see it. There's a visualization there. So when you're working with neurodivergent clients, you just have to well, if you're working with any client, you just really have to attune. And like sometimes a visual is more impactful. We live in a
Yes.
very visual-based world. Neurodivergents are not. Like people are being told what to do by signs all the time, right? Like that's what green light, red light, yellow light is. We pay attention to signs and we pay attention to words. So I write a lot of my things down and I let them see it. Or I write like red, no, this, and I write it in red, and then I write yes, this in green, because our brain is just attuned to those things on a daily
Yeah,
basis.
and we're using those. We have a
Yeah.
question in the chat. Can you explain again neurodivergency and sort of how we conceptualize that as therapists? Like, what is
Okay.
neurodivergency in the brain?
Um, so it's just a different wiring in the brain.
Hmm.
I don't have all of the tiny little details that somebody else may have, but it's just your brain is wired differently. So in the DSM-5, it's like sensory experience, social experience. Stimming is like so repetition, a hyper focus on engaged materials, and then I can't remember the other two, the other qualifiers, but it's essentially the social aspect is almost like you'll hear that
Hmm.
there's the idea of like not really understanding what it is, of having to figure it out, of always feeling on the outside of something. So there's autism is what I was explaining before, and then the other neurodivergence is ADHD, which is hyperactivity or inattentiveness. And that one's all about executive functioning and the ability to have it. And then there's
Love that.
then there's dyslexia, and there's 8 different types, 7 or 8 different types of dyslexia that's out there. There's sensory processing disorder, there's audio processing disorder, there is OCD is also in the umbrella sometimes, depending on who you're speaking to. Uh, I'm about to go on a tangent. Let me just put that over there. And then, then you have like symptoms of like perfectionism, of persistent demand avoidance. Alexithymia is a part of the neurodivergent experience. It's not necessarily a neurodivergent like diagnosis. And then I believe that's the same with audio processing as well. It's a part of the neurodivergent experience, but not necessarily full-on neurodivergence.
I think with what the basic explanation is you have a brain, and so you have, these ideas of like ADHD, the executive functioning is there's some dysregulation, right? Or you have the sensory part. So in a lot of neurodivergence, there's like these sensory parts that are just bleh, or the social parts, right? So we gotta explain it, the DSM.
Like how, like that's like my autistic brain was like, okay, let's get really technical, and you're like, to put it simply, and then but I think that's the play, that's the dynamic, right? Like my ADHD was kicking in because that's when I wanted to go in a tangent specifically about OCD. And then I was like, no, 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 we got to put that over there because then that's not answering the question.
Like these challenges, right? Is just like doing that for yourself all the time, right? And also understanding that we're still perfect. We're still how we're meant to be. But also working with the brain, we have to understand like this impulsivity or this information overload or the sensory component that you're just so beautifully describing there about the visuals and incorporate. And so I think when you look at sort of neurodivergence as a whole, which has just more become common language in therapists just in the last couple of years in my realms. We had autism and we had ADHD, but now we have sort of an overarching kind of under explanation or theoretical model in regards to why certain things are happening with different types of brains. So that's kind of how I have thought about it. It's just kind of as the was it the autism spectrum disorder or the Asperger's kind of went away. Then we kind of have been reconceptualizing or rethinking about different types of brains. And so it's just been a journey, it's been a trip, all the things.
I would definitely take some classes. Like there's a lot of trainers out there that are ready to speak about neurodivergency because it's so important. There's Embrace Autism. That's a website that will there's a bunch of screeners on there that talk about neurodiversity. There is it's just so hard because so many people equate it to oh, well, they don't have a lot of empathy or they don't have social skills. And I'm chock full of empathy. It's ridiculous. It makes me I love sleep because it's the only time I'm not empathizing.
Brain, our brain just gets to rest. It's like, oh, thank God it's over. That was so much work.
Even then, my brain will wake me up in the middle of the night and go, oh, you should stop doing that because blah, 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 blah. Or, oh, you need to check on that. And I go, thank you, thank you, thank you. Can we just go back to sleep? I promise I will totally do what you said, brain, but I need to go back to sleep.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I've trained my brain enough to be like, you're right, you do deserve sleep,
But when you're living in a brain like that with no skills to do that,
yeah.
You're at the carnival where the corn dog's over at the cows, and it's like, okay, well, that's what we mean, right? But let's bring the corn dog back where you're supposed to eat it, right? The cows will visit in a minute, right? Like we're sleeping now.
That's what I wanted to talk about. That's what I wanted to talk about. Okay, so the those who did not get diagnosed in childhood, right? And especially it's just okay, I'm gonna stop saying especially because it's making me upset. Those who have a late diagnosis, there's so much grief that goes into right? And so you specialize in grief. So this is you have to process that grief too.
Yeah.
And if your client is not ready to accept that maybe neurodivergence is a part of their narrative,
Yeah.
then don't bring it up. Like
Yeah.
don't do it, right? Like don't like it has people have to be comfortable with their diagnosis and whether or not they want to be diagnosed. So is it going to be helpful for them to know that they're neurodivergent if they keep wanting to be accepted by the outside world as a neurotypical person and keep trying to live as a neurotypical person? Is it going to help for some people? Yes, because they're ready to change, or not change, but like acceptance, right, is a part of the states of change. You have
Yeah.
to accept something.
Hmm.
But if they're not willing to accept, then that diagnosis isn't going to do anything but cause a rift between you and that client.
I
And
was
then,
just talking with some other clinicians this morning about diagnosing and is it effective and we have to have it, but is it? And so I think I really appreciate your point there on the diagnosing because it's like, um, you know, we understand these with the patient. Is the patient ready to have that experience? And so I think that's a very good empathic point of empathy that we really need to talk about. We were just talking about like narcissism and borderline. Do we tell those patients like, hey, because what are they going to do? They're going to go research it. They're going to go figure and they'll have all this information that probably doesn't apply.
yeah,
And so, we can. I've done it where I slowly insert little pieces of information about what it is over time and then but if it's going to impact them in a negative way then we just don't
yeah,
we don't need to. It's not for their highest and greatest good.
yeah. And to add to that, because I love this brain of mine. Uh, neurodivergency is sometimes mistaken for BPD or
Yes.
major depressive disorder
Yes.
or actually vice versa. So major depressive, am I saying it correctly? Where here we go.
You're right. Yeah, neurodivergence is mistaken for those more common diagnoses like anxiety or depression or they don't see the realm of it, right? Is that what I'm
Right.
hearing?
Well, I'm trying to say that they will be diagnosed with, I was about to say especially again, but I just said it, but not in the way and not in the same rhythm, so it didn't make me upset. Those who are diagnosed with bipolar may have ADHD, depending on, what's really going on there,
Right.
how
Yes.
they experience it. And
Yes.
with general anxiety disorder and depression, that might be neurodivergency in there as well, BPD. So if you have a neurodivergent client who also has trauma, but not like little t trauma, like giant T trauma and like conditioning on top of that that made them have a bunch of neuro negative cognitions, I'm sorry. Um, there might be some BPD traits that are happening in the behavior
And
because
if
of,
we're not educated on neurodivergence or EMDR or assessing the brain, we can give them this diagnosis that creates a sense of self that
yes,
uh, can be harmful, right?
yes,
So understanding what this is and these symptoms, especially I think anxiety, like I
yes,
just have to tick or I just have to, do, it's like, oh, this is what this really is, and it's okay. And so my, Rewire 360 is where we rewire how you learn, lead, and thrive, but also like understanding like with those neurodivergent pathways, we have to adapt because the brain is what it is. No matter what medication is there, we can amp down the anxiety. We can,
yeah.
work on the depression. Personality disorders are a different realm, but
Mhm.
I think they can often sometimes be medicated, right? When it's just these ways, the skills of adapting and understanding how to work with the brain that was given.
Yes. And it's like, how do you handle anxiety if the sun is what's making you
Yeah,
anxious,
right.
right?
Right. Oh my gosh. Wow.
The sun makes me so anxious.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
I know it's the giver of life as well. So like water in the sun, but like it's just me and the sun, boy. We always have conversations.
And you're
Uh,
in Texas, right? Where there's a lot
yeah,
of, uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm in Idaho where we have a full 4 seasons. And so, it's not as, you know,
No.
probably difficult as where you're at. Did you grow up there?
I grew up a little bit in El Paso, a little bit of California, a little bit, and then a big chunk of it in Houston.
Was the sun always present in all those places?
Boy,
Uh-huh.
like El Paso's the desert, so yeah, it's always there. It's
Uh-huh.
always. And that's the other thing too, like I really think play is very much missing in session.
Yeah,
Like,
we're very playful people.
oh man, sometimes too playful, but
You tell us, we're just about ready to close out our time. What advice would you give to anybody that maybe is neurodivergent, considering EMDR or therapist? A few tips for working with people that are neurodivergent. I have a few, but I wanted to ask you first.
if you are neurodivergent and you want to go to therapy, find a neurodivergent affirming therapist.
Mhm.
Sometimes they market it out and they say that, and if somebody offers a free consultation, ask them, what do you know about neurodivergency? And if they
Yeah.
say nothing, just be like, okay, thank you so much for your time. Um,
And for those clients maybe that don't know that that's what's going on too, like
yeah,
um,
yeah,
being able to kind of understand there's a sensory experience and these other
yeah,
things, but you don't. So it's finding somebody is important even if they don't
yeah.
specifically address it.
Well, and then too, like for clinicians, if you want to be a clinician that specializes in something, go for it, right? Like, and if neurodivergency is not what you want to specialize in, like, just I love people who refer out, you know what I mean? And I've had clinicians help somebody find somebody. Like that's how they found me, was because a clinician helped them find
Oh
me,
yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
who would fit, right? But if you are interested in learning how to help people who have EMDR needs and are neurodivergent, there are trainings out there. Christine
Yeah.
Molina has a training. I know that's live. She has a live training, and then she thinks she's done it like 3 times a year. And hers is about subtle autism. There's Susan Paulson, who has one for level 2 and level 3 autism, which is really, really needed. Those
Yeah.
kids, they have successful EMDR sessions as well. Then there is Sandra Paulson has ones that's live pre-recorded or something. Yes. And then Kathy Steele has somebody who does an autism and EMDR training as well. But the information is out there. Be curious, stay curious. Oh, stay curious, stay open, stay curious,
Yes.
stay playful,
Yeah.
oh, we need it so much.
Oh, we do. We get so bogged down with all of the seriousness too. Like,
Yeah.
I think it would be definitely interesting if we both lived near each other. Oh my.
Okay. Thank you for having me, Kathy. I
Oh,
like
I appreciate
appreciate
you.
you.
Thank you, Messina Delgado. You can find her in the link in the chat notes. I'm Kathy Couch with Rewired 360. Join us on our YouTube channel. Remember, make sure to like and subscribe. We will post all of our podcasts here on YouTube, so you can hop on with us and chat. So thank you so much for everyone, and we will see you next time. Take care.
Yes.
Okay, bye. Hey, that was good, girl. You did it. Oh, thank you so much. This is so fun.
And thank you. Like I was so like I'm sweating so bad. I got a portable mini AC. I'm totally gonna use it.
And then I'm like, is this menopause? Am I in premenopause? Oh my gosh. And then I go down that rabbit hole of women's health. It's like, oh my God. Okay. All right. I'll let you surrender you to your Friday. It's good to see